Leviticus 12 is where we're at today. If you want to start turning over there, Leviticus 12. There are explanations we can try to give for why God chose these things. And we're going to give some of those. But the number one explanation is God wanted his people to be holy. Holy means set apart, means different. In some ways, that was different than the idolatrous nations around them. Okay, I didn't want to sneeze and blow his ears out with those headphones, but never mind. In some ways, that means different than the nations around them in their idolatrous worship. And so when we see things like, don't put leaven in your sacrifices, we can think about sin and things like that, but we also just know the surrounding nations did that in their sacrifices. God says don't. It makes you holy, set apart, different than the world. With the animals that we're being told to eat and not eat, there's some definite health benefits. There's some spiritual implications with these things. But the truth is, God says it. It makes them different than the world. And still to this day, anyone who claims Jewish heritage or is Jewish faith is known by they eat different things than the rest of the world. It's one of those defining characteristics that sets them apart. And so it makes holy. We're moving into a new category tonight, and that is the category of childbirth. Then we're going to go into leprosy. Then we're going to go into, not all of these tonight. And then we're going to go into emissions of different body fluids from the body. All of these things have similarities, and that is that blood or something coming out of the body has made you unclean. Now, some of these things, we can easily explain why God might do that for their health benefits. Some of these other things we might have to think longer about, and we may not come up with a health benefit. So what's the overwhelming principle? The same principle as the whole book. God wants them to be holy. If you do these things, you're different than the world around you. Now, God promises them that when they obey him, they will have better health than the world around them. He promises he won't bring diseases and different things like that. He makes several promises that he won't bring upon them when they go into the promised land if they follow his law. Could that be through nature? If you do these things, you won't get as sick from eating the pig. If you do these things, avoiding bringing your little baby out into public, you're less likely for it to get sick. Yes. So God could have used natural means to fulfill his promises when you obey his will. Yes. But the overwhelming principle is God said it. When they did it, it made them different than the world. Yes, sir. Correct. Because they can't. And let me repeat that for everybody else. So G asked, if Jewish people do not eat certain foods, is it because they do not accept the New Testament? In general, yes. There are some Messianic Jews that try to do both at the same time. But you got to be careful with that because Paul talks about if you start keeping one thing, you have to keep all things. But then the second question was, what was the second question again? If they accept eating the certain meats, why aren't they doing the rest of the Old Testament law? And the quick answer to that is they can't. Ever since the temple was destroyed, a lot of things to do with obeying God can't happen when you don't have a place to offer sacrifices, according to the Old Testament. So if you want to be an Old Testament Jew, God made it almost impossible after 70 AD. Another thing is some people today, and this is true in Christianity too, some people are liberal and some people are conservative. What they call it in Jewish is Orthodox. Orthodox Jews are doing everything they can except for the sacrifices. They're still not wearing the clothing that has mixed cloth in it and those type of things. But your average Jewish person outside of Jerusalem follows a few of the parts of the law, but most parts they don't. They're called liberal, but liberal has almost become the majority, I would say. That's not scientific research, but in my mind, I feel like I don't meet very many Orthodox outside of that area. But has anyone any thoughts on that? Yes, sir. Yes. You're right. You're right. So, okay. The answer to why was going to make me breathe really hard and talk for a long time. But I think there is a pretty easy why. They are kissing cousins. The Muslims trace their heritage back to the same ancestry as the Jews do. It just broke off a long time ago. So, yeah. So the Muslims, they also bring their ancestry all the way back to the same patriarchs of the faith, but by the time period of Moses, they would not be the same group. And so they would not have these laws of what to eat and what not to eat, but there are some things that seem like they were already around during the patriarchal dispensation that Moses is just putting more details and putting it in a writing. And so that's probably why there's a lot of similarities, is because of the patriarchal age. Because back during the patriarchal age, there is the same descendant that leads to the two families, one being the Israelites and the other being the Muslims. Good question or thought. And that's a way oversimplification of thousands of years of history. Rosemary. Uh-huh. There are Jewish synagogues. You'd have to go to a pretty big city. Almost like, and it depends on where you are in Oklahoma, but if you're Catholic in most of Oklahoma, you have to go to a big city to find a Catholic church. Similar, you're not going to have synagogues in small towns, but yeah, there are synagogues. Now, the synagogue is not quite commanded by God, but it came up during the interdispensational time. It came between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it still isn't a replacement for the temple, but that's why they did it. They did it when they couldn't get to the temple between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So they used synagogues for the same purpose then that they're using them for now, as a Band-Aid for the temple. Mark? That's right. That's right. Nope. You can be a religious Jew and you can claim to be a blood Jew, but you cannot be a true blood Jew because you can't prove it. And to be of, let me rephrase that. I'm throwing a term on I shouldn't be throwing. Israelite. You cannot be a true Israelite because you had to prove which tribe you came from and be able to trace your lineage. And that's one of those things that providentially, probably, God had destroyed at 70 AD. For the same reason that a lot of people are born into a faith and they just trust it their whole life, just like a lot of faiths. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 No. That's right. That's right. I'm going to repeat that before we start today's class. After 70 AD, the Christians escaped the punishment of 70 AD. With that, some were of the Jewish bloodline. But if you were just a general Jewish person, they were either killed or they were taken captive, just like happened before the New Testament, about 500-600 years before that. So to ever be able to trace that lineage and prove your lineage, and even if you did, it had gotten so mixed because they were marrying foreigners and all kinds of things, which gets rid of the whole proof. All right, we're now going to look at childbirth. Leviticus chapter 12. Don't say that 10 times fast. All right, Leviticus chapter 12. It's a very short chapter, and the majority of today's lesson is going to be more in the explanation of it, because the chapter is very simple. The trying to figure out why, that's hard. After discussing the consequences of uncleanness in regard to creatures, the Lord now starts talking about human beings. The logical place to begin is all the way back at birth. At the moment of birth, uncleanness occurs. However, that uncleanness was, as some might expect, not the child. See, when you think of, as soon as someone's born, uncleanness happens, you think it's the one being born. Nope. And so that actually, I think, will help us as we understand the passage to realize God never calls the child unclean. Okay? The woman who gives birth is unclean. The chapter briefly describes the uncleanness that attached to the mother in the act of giving birth. Then it spends most of its time prescribing how she can become clean again. That's really the major focus of the chapter, is not really what made her unclean, more how to become clean again. Let's read starting at verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a woman conceives and bears a male child, then she shall be unclean." I mean, that's all we have right there. She conceives, she bears a child, she is unclean. 7 days, as at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. Okay. I'm going to break this down as I go, and then if you have questions about any of this, we can break it down more. What he's saying here is follow the exact same rules for this first 7 days that you do for the 7 days of menstruation. So there's no difference in the rules. Blood comes from the body, you're unclean for 7 days. Blood comes from the body through birth, unclean for 7 days, exact same rules. Okay? Let's keep reading. That's with a what? A male. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Now, when we get to the whys and the questions at the end, some people believe that's one of the big defining moments, because there's a clear, concise ending of her uncleanness. When does her uncleanness end? When he is circumcised. When he becomes circumcised. Now, she continues for 33 days in the blood of her purifying. She shall not touch anything holy, nor come into the sanctuary, until the days of her purifying are completed. But if she... Okay, so we'll stop there. So there's two different parts. The first part is... I used this phrase and I deleted it, and then I wrote it back, and then I deleted it, I wrote it back, and I think it's probably the best way to describe it. The first 7 days are intense uncleanness. Because the second set of time doesn't seem to be as intense of uncleanness. It's like unclean and really unclean, I guess you could say. So the first 7 days are intense uncleanness, and then how long with a boy after that? 33 days for a total of 40 days. Now I do also want you to note with this, as with next chapter, which I plan on getting into tonight, we'll see, with the leprosy, there are important numbers that come up throughout the Bible, and 7 days is one of those numbers that just keeps coming up. 7 days. Okay? So 7 days she's really unclean. After that, he's circumcised on the 8th day, then 33 more days of her purifying before she can become fully clean. Harley.
Throughout the Bible, God has held certain numbers that he must lie.
Yes.
7 days.
Yes.
40 days.
40 days.
Now we got 40 days.
Yes.
Here.
Yep. Yeah.
That has anything in his thinking.
Yes. I think the 40 is significant because 40 and 7, 47, 10, 3, 4, there are certain ones that are just always important, but especially with amounts of days, 40 days, 7 days are big ones that we notice a lot. Okay, now we're going to switch to girls. Oh, what happens during the 33 days? What can she not do? Touch anyone? Touch anything holy. There you go, more specifically. Okay. During her first 7 days, it says she's supposed to do the same as her time of menstruation. During that time, she can't touch anyone. So this might be a little loosening of the rules here. You might be able to touch people, but not touch holy things, which, if you can't touch holy things, where can you not go? To the tabernacle/temple. And now you want to talk about something really tough. There's really holy food in the tabernacle if you are a priest, but if you're a priest, there's certain foods that are less holy, and what can you do with those? You can take those home and feed your family. What does this mean for a priest wife after she gives birth? Sounds like none of that holy food can probably be coming into the home and eaten by her during this 33-day period. So she can't touch anything holy, she can't go to worship, but it seems less strict than the 7 days where you can't touch people, because if you touch someone, they become unclean. Boy, I'd like to go on a bunch of New Testament tangents. Y'all remember the woman with the flow of blood? Her going in public to touch Jesus would have made him unclean. So that's what we're talking about here. Arthur. Yes. It's the best vitamin K you'll ever have in your life for a male. I don't know if it's true for a female, but the 8th day is the best vitamin K of your whole life. So when TMI, but we're adults here. Okay, so when our son, we won't call by name in public, but when we had our child circumcised, you know what they have to do? They give a vitamin K shot to the child, because they're circumcising them on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd day when they don't have as much vitamin K. So they have to give them a shot to do what God has done naturally on the 8th day. So they're still doing the same thing today with a shot. You're right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Now a girl. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean for 2 weeks, as in her menstruation. So it's the same rules that happen with the boy, but how long? Twice as long. 2 weeks compared to 7 days. Okay? And what ended the 7 days with the boy? The circumcision. That's what ended her uncleanness. Her uncleanness was ended by his circumcision. Well, there's no circumcision with the girl. We don't know this is the reason, but this seems to be the reason why it's longer. We can get into a lot of seems to's if we have enough time. But with the girl, there's not that end date of the circumcision. It lasts 2 weeks. Okay, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. What is that? Double the boy also. So what's the total for the girl? 80. So 80 days total. All right. When we have some extra time in a minute, we're going to get into guesses of why, but the rules are pretty simple. The guesses to why are where it gets tough. Okay? All right, next part. So this covered the mother's uncleanness. 7 days, circumcision, 33 days. Total, 40 days. 14 days, 66 days. Total, 80 days. Now, how does she finish her time of impurity, uncleanness? And that second period seems to be less unclean. We could call it purification. Okay? How does she become pure, clean again? And when the days of her purifying are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring for the priest at the time of the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb, a year old for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. So she's offering two offerings that have to do with God looking at you for atonement of sin. Interesting. A turtle dove for a sin offering, he shall make the offering before the Lord and make atonement for her. Then she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female, and if she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. What do y'all think about from the New Testament when you heard that? Jesus. What happened with Jesus? His parents must have been poor, because what did they offer? They offered the 2 birds. They didn't offer the lamb. The only way legally you could offer the birds is if you're poor. So that tells you about how, from the very offset at 40 days old, that tells you the kind of wealth his parents did not have. That shows you the house Jesus was born into. But it also shows you how obedient they were to God. They did what they were told to do in the way they were told to do it, in the way they could afford to do it. Okay, now here's all the fun guesses. Some troublesome questions. Childbirth made a mother unclean. Though childbirth made a mother unclean, the child who was born was not considered unclean. First question that people could have trouble with. Does this passage teach the uncleanness of the woman results from childbirth as the equivalent of sinfulness? Because she's being told to offer 2 sacrifices that are sin offerings, does that make childbirth sinful? No. Why not? Yes. It was obeying a command of God to be fruitful and multiply. So God cannot command you to sin. I'm going to give a modern phraseology for that. God does not make anyone born a sinner. That wasn't really where I was planning on going, but that one works too. But actually what I was meaning was God doesn't make someone homosexual. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if he did, and God commands not to be homosexual, then he would make you a sinner. God doesn't do that. In the same way, if God commanded for people to be fruitful and multiply, then being fruitful and multiplying cannot be sinful. So that's not possible. So procreating is not sinful. Giving birth is not sinful. So that cannot be what it's teaching here. That's why I told you when we talked about the sacrifice for sin, the best way to translate it is a sin offering, but the best way to understand it is a purification offering. It can purify you from something like eating the wrong food, or it can purify you from something that's actually sinful. Being unclean and being sinful are not synonyms. And so when you have to use a sin offering, it's not always for sin. Okay? And we're not going to just see that with moms. We're going to see that over and over and over, where you have to use a sin offering, but it's actually about purifying from uncleanness. All right, second difficult question for some people. Why did God require twice as long for a girl? That was actually one of my questions I spent a lot of time thinking about too. Anybody got a guess? And I'm going to tell you, whatever your guess is might be wrong, might be right, because none of us knows. No explanation given. So here's, if you want a physical explanation, here's the most wacko one that I heard. Because it's on an exception, not a rule. God wouldn't make a rule based on exception. He'd make a rule based on a rule, right? The exception is sometimes when you give birth to a daughter, when a child is young, the infant will actually bleed, like menstruation, as an infant. And so someone said, then that gives the possibility of there being a double menstruation period. Nope, I don't believe that one. I think that one's wrong. Because that happens sometimes. That wouldn't happen all the time. So that doesn't make sense to me. Next option. It has to do with that with a boy, there's a clear-cut time to end it because of his circumcision. To me, that one makes more sense. Third option. What did everybody in Jerusalem want to have? What did everybody in the ancient days want to have? He wanted to have a boy. Why? Carried on the family name. So some people say that's the reasoning. Now here's something really interesting, because God does often lift up the people who are put down in society. Some people actually say it's the opposite. It was to lift up the girl. And this goes to the answer to another thought that I'm going to bring up later, but I'm just going to go and bring it up now. Physically, health-wise, why might God do any of this, the 40 days or the 80 days? Why for 40 days or 80 days might you stay home with your child? Why? That's right. That's right. Your child is completely helpless, the most helpless they'll ever be. Your child needs to be protected from all the illnesses out there. And where do you think is a great place to catch an illness? Well, in modern days, we'd say Walmart. But if we were attending worship like we were Walmart, our building should be, right? If you went to the temple or the tabernacle, you're surrounded by hundreds of people at worship. If our worship services were that big, it would be a very scary place to bring a baby into this building, wouldn't it? And I don't push any personal beliefs on other people. That's your own decision how long you keep your baby away, and I'm not going to judge you on that. We kept our babies away a long time because I wanted the baby safe. I can worship or my wife with the baby at home, but I need to protect the child for a few weeks. That was my opinion. I think that's why God did a lot of this, was protection from health. Okay, so going back to that fourth option, the fourth option is God actually was lifting up the females, and don't know how to scientifically say this, but people believe to keep them healthy because the female daughters were weaker. I don't know if there's any science behind that, but that's what some people believed, is that the female daughters were weaker, so he gave them twice as long to be away from sicknesses. Maybe. So there's four options. We don't know the true answer. Phil, did you have a comment?
I was going to say they're doubly complex.
Yeah. Oh.
The true answer is God said it.
God said it. That's right. That's right. Now, here's something really neat to think about, especially if there's kind of a insult to the mother when you don't give birth to a son. Is that a good way to say that? When you don't give birth to a son in China and other countries like that today, it's still the same way. God, what he really does is he is setting up, and we've been talking about the baby, but let's talk about mama for a while. God is setting up mama to be in a safe and healthy place for a long time. Because she's coming out of childbirth where she also is weak. Her immune system, her body is torn down. And number two, you know what God just did? He took away all her work. The only job she has to do for 40 to 80 days is take care of baby. It's a pretty good way to do it. So he's giving her time to nurture a relationship and to heal. Nurture that relationship with the baby and to heal herself, where he is allowing her not to be doing all the normal jobs of life. Harley?
Now, in our school, we give that mother 42 days.
Really? That's neat. The public schools give 42 days. That is really neat.
At that time and place, I suspect that was for the mother and the child, and the best chance of survival for both,
Yes.
because that time is not like our time now.
No.
It was far more critical.
Yep. Yep. If you go back 100 years, not even that long, but 60, 70 years ago, it was not abnormal to lose multiple children. And God made his people holy, set apart from the world. I really wish we knew, and we probably never will know, no matter how much we study, but it would be interesting to know how much less child mortality rates there were amongst Jewish Israelite people. I guarantee God set this up to protect the mamas and the babies, and there was a lot less children's deaths. Chance, do you have one more comment before we go on? Okay. All right. What? Yes, sir. That's what yes. If you don't take anything other than holiness from all of Leviticus, we are protecting the Jews to bring forth the Savior of the world. The Israelites, sorry. We're not to the Jews yet. We got to wait a couple more books of the Bible until they fight. All right, now Leviticus 13, we're still talking about, because what was actually the main word that was used in chapter 12? What was it that made her unclean over and over and over? The blood. So we're still talking about, all these chapters are talking about human bodies who are having something come out of it. Leprosy, blood, emissions, for all these chapters. This one starts leprosy. Okay. How many of you have ever heard a definition of leprosy? What is leprosy? Disease of the flesh? Good. Have any of y'all ever got to travel? I hate to say it, on a cruise ship is where a lot of people do it. But have any of you got to travel and see a leper colony? Or see where people used to be in leper colonies? I figured Calvin and Tori had done that on one of their cruises. Leprosy and leper colonies are not the same thing. Bible leprosy is not Hansen's disease. When we think of leprosy today, we're thinking of Hansen's disease. The better definition is exactly one Ron gave, a skin illness. It involves lots of types of skin illnesses. Let me give you a definition here. Tarzarat referred to a wide range of severe, infectious, contagious skin diseases and other afflictions, including mildew on clothing and mold in houses. So here's the way I would like you to think about it. Here's two phrases I'm going to throw out, and then we're going to keep moving. COVID. What do you all think of when you think of COVID? You think of COVID-19, right? But you know your Lysol bottles already said they killed COVID before 2019. COVID is a big name for an illness that has a specific that came out in 2019. Cancer. There is all types of cancer. I look like I've probably got about 100 that one day are going to have to come off of me if I had to guess. I look like I'm pretty cancered up. Probably won't kill me. But brain cancer is a different thing, right? Blood cancer is a different thing. Bone cancer. There's all types of cancers, and they all do different things to you, and some are more severe and some are less severe. Leprosy is the same way. It's a generic phrase for a skin illness that can be contagious or is very dangerous, but they have different levels of danger and contagious. We also can assign the same phrase to clothing and mold, and here's the best answer we have for why we use the same phrase, is it looked like the same thing on the walls as it would look like on your skin, or it looked like the same thing on your clothes. And it was probably contagious or dangerous, but it was not a skin illness on a wall, but it looked similar and was also dangerous. Okay? And very contagious. That's right. Let's look at some general instructions. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a person has on his skin of his body a swelling or an eruption or a spot, and it turns into a case of leprous disease, and ESV actually gives a definition here, several skin diseases, on the skin or the body, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priest, and the priest shall examine the diseased area of the skin of his body. And if the hair on the diseased area has turned white, and the disease appears to be deeper than the skin of the body, it is a case of leprous disease. When the priest has examined him, he shall pronounce him unclean. But if the spot is white in the skin of the body, let me make sure I'm not reading too far. No, we're covering through verse 8. Through the skin of the body, it is a case of leprous disease. When the priest has examined him, he shall pronounce him unclean. But if the spot is white in the skin of his body and appears no deeper than the skin, and the hair that is in it has not turned white, the priest shall shut up the diseased person for 7 days. See that? And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if in his eyes the disease is checked, and the disease has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up for another 7 days. And the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and if the diseased area has faded, and the disease has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only an eruption. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. If the eruption spreads in the skin after he has shown himself to be the priest for his cleaning, he shall appear again before the priest. The priest shall look, and if the eruption has spread in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous disease. Okay. Some general instructions. Why don't y'all go through this with me and tell me what rules you find? First of all, what is he looking for in the initial examination? White hair. Okay, what else? Ron's worried. He said white hair, and he's seeing a lot of white hair on himself. All right, what else, Rosie? A spot. Good. Harley? Deeper than the skin. Okay. If it is not what looks like leprosy, what does he do with him? 7 days of isolation. If it is leprosy, what does he do with him? Isolation. Okay, so next step is isolation. If the priest found it to be deeper than the skin or white, that person is unclean. Otherwise, they were just 7 days of observation and isolation. So they're not completely isolated yet. They're just being observed, and let's protect everybody just in case. Then after 7 days, what does he do? Re-examines him, and if he decides that it is not spread and the person is not unclean, what does he do? The priest shall examine him on the 7th day. If in his eyes the disease is checked, what does he do? He shuts him up for another 7 days. So 7 days, check him. It's not spread and it doesn't look like leprosy yet. But let's wait another 7 days. Another 7 days, he checks them again, and then they determine it. Okay? This is the general rule. Now, the rest of the chapter, he's going to describe different types of leprosy, different skin diseases, and how each one would look if it was leprosy. Okay? But I think that is the majority of our time today. So, my very last slide for this class, I'm going to skip to right now, Jackson, if you don't mind. There's that clock. I knew it was chasing me. All right. Leprosy is loathsome. It is something that no one wants to be around, no one wants to have. Sin is loathsome. The disease has an insignificant, almost imperceptible beginning. Sin is often that way. At the beginning, we barely even notice we're doing it or realize that it started in our life. The disease is progressive. Sin is progressive. It gets worse and worse, and we get hooked more and more, and it hurts us more and more as we go on. It affects the whole body. Sin is the same way. Sin doesn't just affect the tongue, it might affect the actions. The actions don't just affect the actions, they might affect the family. It affects the whole body. The part of the body becomes insensitive or numb that has leprosy. Eventually, we can make our heart numb to hearing curse words. Eventually, we can make our eyes numb to seeing pornography. Eventually, we can numb ourselves to sin in the same way, to where we don't even feel it. It is incurable. Is that true with sin? No. We have a cure for sin, don't we? It separates a person from the sanctuary of God. Unfortunately, it's not supposed to, but unfortunately, a lot of times we let sin, I feel guilty about the way I'm living. I should just start missing worship because it feels better not to be around the people of God. And which goes into the next point. Leprosy stops fellowship with other people in the Lord's body in the Old Testament. Sin, oftentimes, we use the sin to separate ourselves from other Christians because we don't want to feel like we're doing bad, so let's just not spend time with each other. And leprosy eventually causes death. Sin eventually causes death. And dealing with leprosy requires extreme measures. And our sin, especially the longer we've had it, the more extreme the measure is to get rid of it. That was not my list, but I thought that was a good list for you. Thank you for your time.